Welcome to The Appleseed, the storytelling podcast from BYU Radio, where your family can gather for great stories from great storytellers in every episode. Stories bring us together, and we hope the stories on the show will spark memories and thoughts that you can share with the people you love. I'm your host, Sam Payne. Can you point to the moment when a person stops being a kid and becomes a grown-up? I'll admit that I can't. Growing up is the kind of thing that doesn't happen in a moment. But I can point to a lot of moments in which you do things that seem like steps away from being a child and toward being a grown-up. I felt like getting my own library card was one of those things. I felt like learning to drive a car was one of those things. Learning to shave was one of those things. These rites of passage, these moments of learning to step into the role occupied by the grown-ups. Those become important parts of a person's story. And we've got a couple of African folk tales on the show today that include stories about rites of passage, about moments that help people go from being children to being grown-ups. And the first one comes to us from our friend Antonio Rocha, a Brazilian storyteller who lives in Maine. Now, the story is called Musa's Son. Here's Antonio, recorded live in the Appleseed studio.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Musa's son. Musa's son was adored by everybody in the village. He was a great kid. He was a great listener. He listened to his parents. He listened to his grandparents, and nobody called him by his name. He was known as Musa's son because Musa was the chief of the village, and that boy was his only son. Yeah. He had a daughter too. The chief, had a daughter, Musa's daughter. But Musa's son, I was very busy helping people out in the neighborhoods and playing with friends. And then there was the rite of passage ritual that all the kids had to endure. All the boys, that is. You could not become a young man without passing the test. And that is to stand in a small circle at the edge of the desert with nobody, no food, no water all day long. And when Musa's son's day came, he was quite nervous because his father was not going to cut him any slack because he was the chief's boy, no. And an elder himself, Musa, took his son to the circle. We're almost there. I'm very happy that I still have enough strength to bring you to this circle. Here we are. Here we are. We've arrived. I stood here when I was like you. My father stood here. You know the stories. They go on and on for a long time. Today is your day. Step inside. It's a very small circle, and there's a purpose for that. Yes, you must not step outside. You must remain inside the circle until I return later on to bring you home. The sun is already hot. Don't be a fool and look at it. You know better than that. It's going to get hotter. You feel like your brains are being cooked. Remember the stories. Courage. Responsibility. No matter what you see here, remain in the circle, and you'll be fine. You step outside, you'll never get married. You'll never have a family. And you'll never be chief. Good luck. He watched Musa, his dad, disappear as if consumed by the heat. He didn't want to bring shame to the family. He stood in the middle of that circle bullseye. It was so hot already. Oh, he would do well with a lot of water right now. But there's no water, there's no food, there's nobody. Just him and the desert and the small circle. It was not fair, it was so small. And he stood there, and that's when he saw a sandstorm coming. A sandstorm, a sandstorm! Come on, not today. A sandstorm, and from it, a rhinoceros. The beast was charging towards him. A grown person would have run away, but he stood tight. He stood in that circle with the rhinoceros getting closer and closer and closer. And then he remembered something his family had taught him. His grandparents talked about it often. We receive with one hand, we give with the other. We receive with one hand, we give with the other. We receive with one hand, we give with the other. We receive with one hand, we give with the other. And that felt good. And when he opened his eyes, the rhinoceros was gone. The sandstorm, no more. And his feet still there in the middle of the circle. Good. Oh no, another sandstorm. Another sandstorm. One after another. Perhaps another rhinoceros. No, this time it was a serpent so large it could consume a human whole. It was just getting closer and closer and closer. This long snake getting closer and closer and closer still. And then he remembered yet something else he had learned. We respect all things great and small. We respect all things great and small. We respect all things great and small. And that felt so good. He felt so right. And when he opened his eyes, the serpent was gone. And the sky was blue again, no storm brewing. And his feet had moved around inside the circle, but no trespassing, no steps beyond the edge of the circle. And his shadow had grown to what they call a sunset shadow. You know, I always look good in a sunset shadow. You know? Yeah, everybody looks tall in a sunset shadow. And that meant that he was going to go home soon. And he looked towards where his father might be coming. And there was no signs of Musa yet. Oh, that's all right. He made sure. He was a little confused. He was extremely tired, dehydrated beyond belief. There was a lion in front of him. There was no storm. He could smell the thing. It was an old lion, one of those lions without a pride, you know? Scars across the lion's face. It looked like he couldn't see out of one eye. The mane was missing. This lion had gone through a lot, and this lion was hungry. And the lion stepped towards Musa's son. And Musa's son had a chill go up and down his back, even though it was hot and he was tired. And he moved away from the center of the circle. But there's no way he was going to step outside the circle. No way. No, not today. Come on. And then the lion quit. And it turned away, uninterested. But it was moving away like lions do when they go hunting, ever so slowly, putting its paw ever so carefully. And right beyond the lion, Musa saw his mother and his sister. What are they doing here? They're not supposed to be here. And they're not even looking at him. They're looking that way, in the opposite direction. Mom! Mother, sister. And he jumped up and down. He screamed from the top of his lungs, but they couldn't hear him. They couldn't hear him. They wouldn't turn around. And the lion was getting closer and closer and closer and closer still and closer still and closer still. And all of a sudden, Musa's son just ran as fast as he could towards his mom and ran and grabbed her. But there's nothing there. Oh. His sister was gone. The lion was gone. Whoa. Oh, what an illusion. What a nightmare he had just seen. Good thing. Good thing there's nothing going on. He could just focus on the... He could see his footsteps into the sand. He had run away from the circle. And in panic, Musa's son failed the ritual. And he saw his father coming now, and he could not even look at him. I'm sorry. I failed everything. No. You failed nothing. Huh? You've done wonderful. Look at you. Let's go home and celebrate. There's nothing to celebrate about. I ran from the circle. I ruined everything. No, that's not what happened. It looks that way. But that's not so. You didn't run away from the circle. Hey, shh. Calm down. The rhinoceros came, you stood in the circle. The serpent came, you stood in the circle. You remembered things we taught you. And then the lion came. He was no threat to you he was a threat to your mother and your sister. Shh. No, you didn't run after nothing. Love is not nothing. You're told to stay in the circle. Why are you going to stand in the circle and watch your mother and your sister be devoured by a lion? You got to think on your own 2 feet, young man. Everybody's told to stay in the circle. But the ones who succeed run. Courage is important. Respect, of course. But without love, it's not the same. Let's go home and celebrate. And that's exactly what they did.
That was Antonio Rocha with Musa's son. And listening to this story reminds me of a time when I was 12 years old, and I thought I'd try to do something I'd only seen grown-ups do. Now, I'd been to scout camp, where a camp counselor showed us how to saddle a horse. It was the only time I'd seen it done, but I thought I had the steps down pretty well in my brain. I'd even ridden that horse for a little bit after the camp counselor saddled it, so I figured I was pretty much an expert. So when my pal Eric Murdoch called me on the phone on a summer afternoon to let me know that a neighbor said we could go and ride one of his horses, but we'd have to saddle it up and take it out ourselves, and did I know how to do that? I said, of course. And 15 minutes later, we were getting the saddle on this beautiful chestnut horse, and 5 minutes after that, Eric climbed up behind me on the saddle, and off we went. We rode out of the neighborhood and through the foothills that bordered our little town. We hoped our friends would see us. We hoped our folks would see us. We were casting off the shackles of childhood and engaging in the perfectly grown-up activity of riding a horse, after having saddled it ourselves. Well, after about 10 minutes of that, in a beautiful field of wildflowers on the edge of town, Eric and I found ourselves in a pile on the ground with the saddle on top of us and the horse munching grass nearby. It seems that saddling a horse was a trickier prospect than either of us thought or that I remembered. We wound up having to carry the saddle home and walking beside the horse, leading it by the reins. We went back to its home. Or maybe it was leading us. It seemed to pretty much know the way. I guess failing at something you were sure you were going to get right on the first try is its own sort of growing up. Maybe realizing that failing is just as much a part of the process as succeeding is a rite of passage in its own way. And that's where Antonio's story took me. Where did it take you? And who will you take along? There's a lot coming up, but first I want to introduce you to another show from the BYU Radio family of podcasts. The show is called Top of Mind, and it's perfect for people who want to engage with tough issues that matter in our communities, but are turned off by how polarizing and divisive these conversations can sometimes be. Each week, Top of Mind tackles one tough, important topic. An award-winning host, Julie Rose, talks with guests who have complicated perspectives that are sure to challenge you. Now, they're not trying to change your mind, just give you the chance to find more empathy and clarity so you can become a better citizen and a kinder neighbor. Listen to Top of Mind on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, all kinds of ways to find Top of Mind and listen whenever you like, whenever you need it. Top of Mind with Julie Rose from BYU Radio.
We're so glad to have you with us on the Appleseed Podcast today. Our next story is brought to us by Charlotte Blake Alston, who teaches here that even though we change as we get older, our love for those close to us doesn't have to change. Let's join Charlotte now in the Appleseed studio.
Thank you. The story comes from Kenya. Chura Marwe. Far to the east, there is a mountain whose tops are lacquered with white every month of the year. Along the slopes, there once lived 2 orphaned children. Well, not actually orphaned. Throughout the history of humankind, time and place, childhood has not always been pleasant for all children. For each of these children, their parents could not afford to feed them, so they gave them to another family. The family used them as workers to help with watching flocks or in the fields. People would look at Chura and look at Marwe, and they would ask, how is it possible that God could make 2 so different? Because Marwe was beautiful and Chura looked like a toad. But they had each other. And as children, they became fast friends. He was all she had. She was all he had. They comforted each other when they were low. Once they were sent out into the bean fields to watch the field, they would beat on the pots to keep the monkeys away. It was in a clearing that was surrounded by trees, but it trapped the heat in. And they were so hot that day. And they had done a good job of beating those pots and keeping the monkeys away that they decided that they would go down to a small pond that was formed from melting snow to cool themselves off. Only a minute, said Chura. They ran down, they splashed the water on themselves, they drank some of it and ran back up the hill, and in that short amount of time, the monkeys had practically stripped the field. They fell to their knees, they knew what was going to happen. They knew that the family was going to be angry at them, they knew that they might even be beaten. Marwe jumped up in tears and began to run away, running back towards that pond. Chura ran after her, Marwe, Marwe, but he couldn't reach her before she jumped into the water of the pond. He ran back up to the family to tell them what had happened. They ran all the way down, but all that was there was one small leaf moving in a circle on the surface of the water. Marwe was gone. And yes, Chura was beaten and mistreated time after time until finally he had had enough. And he left the people and never saw them again. When Marwe entered the water, she floated down, down, down to where the water was bright like the afternoon, all the way down to where it was sort of a soft blue of evening, all the way down to where it was black, like a night with no moon and no stars. And there, she stepped out into the underworld, shook the water from her hair, and began to walk. She walked until she saw a small hut. There were children playing in front of it. Beyond that, around a curve up the hill, was what looked like a village. It was a village that appeared new because the fencing had wood where the bark had just been stripped, and the thatched roof was newly dried. An old woman came out of the hut and saw her walking and asked her where she was going. She said, "I'm going to go to that village to maybe find something to eat or find work." "Oh," said the old woman, "it's not time for you to go there yet. Why don't you stay here? You can help me in my garden. You can help with some chores. You can watch the children." And so she did. She remained there, had a warm place to sleep, had food every single night, and the woman offered her a kindness she had not ever known in her life. Chura continued to travel from village to village, asking, begging for food. People would take a look at his face and keep their distance. They would toss the food at him, deciding that if he had a face like that, it could only have been because of some sort of evil act. He had to hunt himself at night. He walked for days until finally he found himself in a valley, in a desert area, flat land with trees with tiny, tiny branches that provided no shade at all. Ants built huge towers. This was the land of the Maasai. And after walking for some miles, he began to see the warriors, some of them standing on one leg like storks, with spears as long as their arms and shields with bright, bold colors. When they saw him, they decided, we can make a servant out of him. What an ugly person. Of course, anyone outside of Maasai are ugly anyway. So he watched the cattle for them and did chores for them until one night he was in a hut and a lion came to attack the cattle. He grabbed a spear, ran out and killed it. They came running and said, alone and without a shield, this is new life you show yourself. You may not have been born Maasai, but there has got to be a little bit of Maasai in you, or you could not have done that. So they gave him the spear that he had used to kill the lion. And after they had cured the skin and took the mane, they made a huge mask, a headdress. They gave him 2 more feet of height. And they said, "Now, what is this name you have? Chura, there's no Maasai can have that name. It means toad. We need to find a name for you. Bunamalai, which means donkey. Kefaru, rhino. How about nguruwe, pig?" And Chura started to grip the spear. He said, "If you can be civil." He said, "We are just joking. We mean you no harm." And they sat down in the hut and all night began to joke and laugh, but finally came upon a name they thought would be the most suitable name for Chura. Several years went by. Marwe had grown to be as beautiful a woman as she had been a girl, and now she longed for the world above, and she always thought about Chura. The old woman noticed the sadness in her face and asked her what caused it. She didn't want to offend her or make the woman sound like she was ungrateful for her kindness, and the woman was not. She told her that she longed for the world above. She longed for the sun. She longed for the bird song. "Ah," said the old woman, "this I cannot help you with, but they may. It's time for you to go to the village." So she left the woman's hut and she began to walk, and she sat outside the gates until these men came with long flowing robes and asked her what she was doing there. And she told them that she longed for the world above and wished to return. Said the one who seemed to be the leader, "Tell me, which do you prefer, the warmth or the cold?" The warmth? She didn't understand the question. I don't understand. As soon as she said that, their voices got softer, and she could read no expression on their face. "We have asked you the question. We cannot help you unless you answer. Which do you prefer? The warmth or the cold? She knew this was a question that needed her to think carefully. The warmth or the cold? In normal circumstance, people would pick warmth because it provides comfort. The cold is hard and harsh. But if you look at it in a normal way, she said to herself, my life has been the opposite. Above, Chura was ugly, but he was kind, and I loved him and he loved me back. And here is a place that people fear, but I have known nothing but kindness here. The warmth or the cold. I will use my own wisdom and choose the cold. Again, she could read nothing from their faces, but the same leader held out 2 pots and said, choose as you have chosen. From one pot, there was steam that was rising. The other, when you got near it, you felt the frost. But she stuck her arm in the cold pot and pulled it out. It was filled with jewels. She put in the other hand. They said, you can take more. Neither we nor the pots will be offended. She put in her feet and came out again with jewels and bangles, and they gave to her a skirt and told her that she had chosen well and wisely. They led her to the place where she had entered and said, we have one more gift for you, a piece of advice. When you go back to your world, many will come to marry you, but you must only marry a man by the name of Simba. And they gave her just a little shove, and she rose like a thought, until once again she reached the surface where that same one leaf spun on the surface. She sat down, and news began to spread of this beautiful young woman sitting on the bank. And men began to come one by one to impress her. I am a great warrior. I would make a great husband for you. I am a chief. I am a wealthy man. And for each one, she would ask, what is your name? Name? The Nuvo. The Makwane. But then I cannot marry you. Well, who can you marry? I can only marry a man by the name of Simba. Simba? And one by one, they would leave. But word continued to spread about this young, beautiful woman, and it reached all the way to the land of the Maasai, where Chura heard it. That's Marwe. She has come back from the underworld, and I'm going to see her. He picked up his spear, and he came running across the land, and in the distance she saw what she thought initially was an animal from this huge headdress. But then she recognized his ugly toad face. It was still Chura. It added height to him, but he was still the same height. Marwe. They jumped into each other's arms and danced around. And she said, oh, fate is just so cruel. You are the only one I have ever loved, but I can't marry you. You can't marry me. Why can't you marry me? I can only marry a man by the name of Simba. Simba? You can... Simba! Simba! That's my name! The Maasai gave me the name when I killed a lion! Simba, it means lion! That is my name! They jumped and ran in circles until they collapsed on the ground in tears and in laughter and in tears. And yes, they did marry. And something happened to his toad face after they got married. He started to look, passable. But people still wondered, some would say out loud, how they could not understand how so beautiful a woman could marry so ugly a husband. But for Marwe, that did not matter one infinitesimal bit.
That was Charlotte Blake Alston with Chura and Marwe. Is there a moment in your life when you felt yourself taking a step toward growing up, a rite of passage you can point to? Or is there a kid in your life who you saw take that same kind of step and could stand being reminded of how proud you were? I bet you've got some stories. We hope you'll share them with the people you love. In fact, we hope you'll share the stories with us. We might share them on the show. You can tag us on social media or send us a message at theappleseed@byu.edu. That's theappleseed, all one word, at byu.edu. And here's a reminder to check out our other shows, including Wink, Stories for Better Bedtimes, and Kaboom, an audio adventure podcast. Both of these shows offer engaging stories sure to thrill and uplift young listeners, as well as the rest of the family. You can find them anywhere you get your podcasts. We want to thank Antonio Rocha and Charlotte Blake Alston for sharing their stories with us today. You've listened to their stories. Now it's time to share some of your own. The Appleseed is produced by me, Sam Payne, Wendy Folsom, and Brian Tanner. Assistant producers include Garrett Gunnell, Carrie Griggs, Kay Hendrickson, and Nico Wetzel. And our post team is Trent Reimschussel and DJ Cromartie. We're pleased and proud to be among the many podcasts produced by the BYU Radio family of shows. If you want more great storytelling for the whole family, then search for our companion podcasts, Kaboom for original audio adventures, and Wink, Stories for Better Bedtimes. All our podcasts can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on the BYU Radio app or at BYUradio.org. Don't forget to subscribe, rate us, leave us a review. That's how the shows grow. I'm Sam Payne, and we can't wait to be with you again on the Appleseed.